In court today, he stood in a jail jumpsuit. Once surrounded by luxury and quiet suburban streets, now facing a future behind bars. Prosecutors say he murdered his own mother inside their multi-million-dollar Connecticut home. A town known for wealth and calm has now been shaken by a crime almost too shocking for neighbors to believe. Sebastian Von Stockham was just 20 years old, living a comfortable life with his mother in a prestigious community. Filled with manicured lawns and expensive homes, but police say behind those perfect surroundings, something dark was growing. One night he picked up the phone and calmly called for help. He told dispatchers he had killed his mother with a hammer. When officers arrived, he sat inside the home crying out, "Mama," as they entered. It was a chilling scene in a place where violent crime is almost unheard of. His mother, Laura Williams, was 55. She was driven, hardworking, and admired by friends and family. She built a life surrounded by antiques and beauty. She raised her son in comfort and opportunity. Investigators say she supported him every step of the way. But support was not enough to stop what happened that night. Neighbors described the family as private. No one expected a quiet home filled with expensive art and vintage treasures to become a crime scene. Yet police walked through blood-stained floors where a successful woman lost her life to her only child. Sebastian had posted unusual things online, strange writings hinting at confusion and a fractured state of mind. Authorities believe his digital footprint offers clues to what may have been happening in his thoughts in the days leading up to the killing. Now he sits in custody, facing a lifetime behind bars. A wealthy Connecticut town mourns a mother who did everything she could for her son. And the question that hangs over this case is simple and haunting. What turned privilege and promise into tragedy and horror inside that beautiful home?
There were no warning signs in their past, no long criminal history, no trail of violence or danger. Sebastian and his mother, Laura Williams, lived quietly and without trouble. And that is what makes this case even harder to understand. Laura was known as driven and successful. She built a business, raised her son, and lived a life surrounded by art and antiques. Nothing about her life suggested danger. Yet behind those peaceful walls, something tragic was brewing. Investigators searched for answers and looked into their backgrounds. Nothing stood out. No reports, no arrests, no criminal past. Just a well-to-do mother and her young adult son living in a picture-perfect town. Meanwhile, detectives worked to learn more about Sebastian himself. His social media presence was small, almost invisible, but one profile offered a strange window into his mind. He had created a page on a roommate matching site. It read like a mix of awkward humor and confusion. He called himself Seb, and wrote about his name as if it carried some special meaning. He joked about being one of many Sebastians in school, and talked about parents wanting to name their kids after him. He described himself as average, tall, and unsure about college. He mentioned being a gamer, admitting it was hard to put the controller down once he got deep into a game. On the surface, nothing in that profile screamed danger. It looked like the rambling thoughts of a young man still trying to figure out who he was. But now, every word seems unsettling in hindsight. A quiet introduction, a normal description. Yet behind it, investigators now say, was someone capable of an unthinkable act. A son who would take the life of the woman who raised him. A crime with no warning, no history, and no clear reason. Just heartbreak, confusion, and a community searching for answers.
He wrote about trying to control habits. He talked about time checks and needing to take better care of himself. He mentioned graphic novels and then shifted into a strange reflection about cannabis. He said he marked himself as cannabis-friendly but was trying to slow down. He wrote that when he was younger, he would have listened if someone told him to stop, but now he claimed the habit held him down, costing him money and piling up debt, especially on gaming. His words wandered, drifting between humor, confession, and confusion. Then he ended his profile with a dramatic closing. He compared his thoughts to a book that would sell 0 copies. He signed off as if writing a farewell speech, rather than a simple roommate introduction. These were unusual lines for someone looking to share an apartment, but at the time they seemed harmless. Just a young man lost in his own thoughts, unsure of life, struggling to find direction. His uncle later said Sebastian argued with his mother about his future. She wanted him to make something of himself, but she also supported him, stood by him, and encouraged him through every stage of life. She believed in him even when he doubted himself, which makes what came next almost impossible to understand. One night, police received a call from a passerby. Someone heard a voice crying out, "Mama," in the darkness. It was late, just before midnight, in the quiet Connecticut neighborhood where nothing like this ever happens. Officers rushed to the scene, and the sight they found was devastating. In the driveway lay Laura Williams, motionless, her life taken from her in the most violent way. A mother who dedicated her life to her son, now gone in the cold night air. And her son, the young man she raised and supported, was inside calling out for her after the unthinkable had already been done.
Police arrived to a scene that would haunt them. They found Laura Williams with severe blunt force trauma to the side of her head. Her skull was cracked. Blood pooled beside her on the cold driveway. Close by lay a hammer stained with blood. This was no accident. This was violence up close, violent enough to shock even seasoned officers. As police moved toward the house, they saw Sebastian inside. He sat on the floor with a phone pressed to his ear. The call to 911 was still connected. When officers entered, they handcuffed him without resistance. He offered no attempt to flee. Just a quiet stillness and words that confirmed the unimaginable. "She's dead," he said. When asked if he was involved, he answered with chilling clarity, "What does it look like?" Then came the words no child should ever say, "I did it." He explained how he tried a knife, then a hammer, and even his fists. He admitted he knew she would not wake up. "She's not going to wake up," he repeated. In the police car, he broke down. He called himself a problem since birth. He said he deserved to suffer. He asked for pressure, for punishment, as if desperate for pain to match the horror of what he had done. Paramedics checked him. He told them he deserved every bit of suffering coming his way. Investigators then searched the home and discovered another disturbing scene inside. Blood, evidence of a struggle, a violent end to a devoted mother's life. The next morning, he appeared in court. Tall, wearing an orange jail jumpsuit, silent and empty-faced. He stared down as his attorney spoke. No tears, no emotion, just a young man who had thrown away his life in a single night of unimaginable violence. He qualified for a public defender, and the judge scheduled his next hearing. The small, upscale community watched in disbelief. New Canaan is not a place where brutality like this happens. It is quiet, wealthy, safe, yet now it carries the weight of a mother killed by her own son, and a town forever changed by one night of horror.
A former classmate later revealed that Sebastian once took a high school forensics class. He studied blood spatter, crime scene breakdowns, even mock murder investigations. It was meant to be just another elective, but now those lessons echo with chilling irony. That same classmate remembers him as socially awkward, withdrawn, never quite fitting in. After the killing, he was held on a $2 million bond, sitting in a Connecticut jail as the court date approached. While the facts of the case shocked the public, experts were also trying to understand the mind behind the violence. A trauma specialist reviewed his statements. She saw someone who knew what he had done, yet sounded detached, almost stunned by his own actions. She questioned whether he was fully present in the moment of the attack,
or if reality only hit him afterward, like waking up from a nightmare. The expert pointed out that his words showed awareness, guilt, and shock all tangled together. He admitted to the killing, described how it happened, and expressed self-loathing. But the deeper question now is why? Was this a moment of sudden rage, or a mind slowly unraveling over time? Investigators and doctors will search his history for answers. They will look into his mental state, his emotional struggles, and what pressures he carried in silence. What was happening inside this young man's mind before that tragic night? How did a quiet, privileged life twist into something dark and deadly? A community, a courtroom, and a grieving family now wait for those answers. But no matter the explanation, one truth remains. A mother is gone. A son destroyed his own future. And a peaceful town will never forget the night privilege turned to horror, and love turned to violence, inside a $1 million home. Experts began asking the questions everyone else was afraid to voice. What was his relationship with his mother really like behind closed doors? Was there a family history of mental illness that no one saw or no one talked about? Could untreated psychological issues have slowly built up until they exploded in the most tragic way possible? Investigators searched for answers, trying to piece together a past that may explain a brutal present. His statements revealed a young man crushed by self-hatred. He spoke about failure, pressure, feeling broken since the beginning. Guilt poured out of him, not as a defense, but as a confession drenched in despair. Yet the law demands clarity. If he were to claim insanity, he would need to prove he had no understanding of what he was doing, that he was lost in a fog where reason no longer existed. But his words that night suggested something more complicated. He admitted it. He described it. He recognized the horror. He questioned himself, calling his life a burden, calling himself a problem since birth. A mental health expert wondered whether he was conscious in the moment or if his mind detached from reality, acting on impulses he could not control. Did he understand the screams, the blood, the terror in his mother's eyes? Or was his mind swallowed by something dark until he snapped back into consciousness with horror at his own actions? Did he keep going even as she suffered, unable to stop himself? Or did he not truly comprehend the reality of what he was doing until it was too late? Questions swirl with no easy answers. A mother gone, a son lost to a moment of violence and madness, and a courtroom now left to determine whether this was pure evil or a mind breaking apart in silence before anyone ever noticed. The questions now reach far beyond what happened that night. Experts say there are countless mental illnesses that can lead someone down a dark path. The challenge is discovering what truly lived inside his mind. Was there a hidden diagnosis? Was he quietly battling something no one recognized? Even without a documented history of violence, it is possible he carried silent struggles that never made it into medical records. Some people suffer in isolation, masking pain until it erupts in a single catastrophic moment. This case feels like one of those tragedies. A young man lost in the crowd, unnoticed, unseen, slipping through life while internal storms brewed. Maybe there were subtle signs that everyone missed, signs that only make sense now, when it is far too late to intervene. The only way to uncover the truth will be through deep psychological evaluation. An experienced psychiatrist will examine him, looking for patterns, symptoms, and clues to determine whether he acted in madness or in conscious cruelty. If his defense team argues insanity, they face a steep burden. It is not enough to show he struggled mentally or experienced distress. They must prove that in the exact moment of the killing, he had no understanding of reality, no grasp of right or wrong. They must show he acted without control, without awareness, truly lost in a break from reality. That is a difficult standard, and it will likely become the center of this case if it goes to trial. The courtroom will decide if this was the act of a sick mind overwhelmed by unseen torment, or a calculated and deliberate choice that cannot be excused. Until then, the silence lingers. A devastated family, a community searching for answers, a mother gone forever, and a son waiting in a jail cell, trapped between guilt, darkness, and whatever truth his mind holds within.
Even if doctors find delusions or hallucinations, even if tests show psychosis or a serious mental disorder, none of that alone guarantees an insanity defense. To claim legal insanity, they must prove that in the exact moments when he attacked his mother, he was incapable of understanding reality, incapable of knowing right from wrong, lost completely inside a broken mind. Anything less, and the law sees it not as insanity, but as a terrible crime committed by someone who was unwell but still aware. In court, both sides will bring their experts. The prosecution will argue he knew exactly what he was doing. The defense will try to show a mind fractured beyond control. And somewhere in the middle will be a psychiatrist trained to analyze the darkest corners of human behavior. They will test him, question him, dig into his thoughts, his past, his actions. They will search for signs of schizophrenia, bipolar disorder, or other severe illness. They will look not just at what he says, but how he thinks, how he reacts, whether he shows remorse, confusion, or detachment. Multiple specialists will weigh in. Their job will not be to excuse the crime, but to understand why it happened and whether his mind was shattered in those violent moments or painfully aware. But the expert notes one chilling truth. Even if he did know what he was doing, something deep inside him was broken, something powerful enough to turn a son against the person who loved him most. Whether driven by mental illness or overwhelming emotional collapse, the result was the same. A life stolen, a family destroyed, a community stunned, and a young man sitting in a cell facing the consequences of a night that will define him forever.
Even if insanity cannot be proven, his mental state may still shape what happens to him. If a jury sees signs of deep psychological struggle, depression, personality disorder, emotional collapse, it may not clear him of guilt, but it could soften the punishment. When overwhelming evidence shows he committed the crime, the battle shifts from guilt to consequence. In sentencing, judges and jurors weigh many things. Was this a ruthless act or a broken mind spiraling out of control? Did he lash out in cold blood or fall apart under years of untreated emotional pain? If evaluations confirm serious mental illness, the court may show a sliver of mercy. It will not bring his mother back. It will not erase the horror. But it may decide whether he spends the rest of his life behind bars or receives treatment alongside punishment. Yet the expert made one point painfully clear. For his mother, it is already too late. A life filled with love and support ended in violence, a family shattered, a community mourning. And now, as the legal system prepares to judge him, the story turns to those who knew him best. Family members may soon speak. They may share who Sebastian was before that night, what struggles he carried, what signs, if any, were missed. Their voices will help build the full picture, not to excuse the tragedy, but to understand how a son reached the point of destroying the person who gave him life. In the end, the courtroom will weigh his past, his mind, and his actions. But one truth remains unchanging. His mother is gone. Her final moments were filled with fear and pain. And no sentence, no expert testimony, no explanation will ever undo what happened on that quiet night in Connecticut. He had no criminal history, no violent past.
just a 20-year-old kid from a quiet, wealthy town, recently out of high school, living in a safe community where crime hardly exists. That is why this case shocks everyone who hears it. How does someone go from an ordinary life, no contact with police, no record, to being accused of brutally taking the life of their own mother? Mental health experts say it happens more often than people realize. Sometimes there are no visible signs, no police calls, no therapy notes, no warnings that anyone recognizes. A young person can struggle in silence, hiding thoughts of self-harm or violence until one moment everything snaps. Social awkwardness alone does not explain it. Many teenagers feel isolated. Many young adults question life, drift, or struggle privately. But when those hidden battles mix with deep emotional pain, untreated mental illness, or dangerous impulses, tragedy can unfold without a single earlier arrest or record. Cases like this remind communities of a painful truth. You cannot always see mental health struggles from the outside. A nice house, a good neighborhood, a quiet student. None of it guarantees safety or stability. When dark thoughts go unnoticed and untreated, they can grow in secret. Sometimes they become suicidal thoughts. Sometimes they turn outward. And sometimes they lead to violent acts no one suspected. Stories like this are grim warnings. They show why mental health awareness matters, why families, schools, and communities must listen, pay attention, and take emotional distress seriously, even when everything looks normal on the surface. Because ignoring early signs does not make them disappear. And when pain stays hidden long enough, it can erupt in one terrible moment, leaving heartbreak, devastation, and unanswered questions behind. In this quiet town, a mother is gone. A son sits in a cell, and a community learns the hardest lesson, that danger does not always come from strangers. Sometimes it grows in silence, within the walls of a home no one ever imagined would become a crime scene.
She supported her son in everything he did. She encouraged him, she pushed him to build a future. But behind that encouragement, there were arguments, quiet tension over direction, motivation, purpose. Normal disagreements at first glance, but in a home where someone may be battling unseen mental struggles, even ordinary conflict can become dangerous. No one knows how much she understood about the storm building inside him. Maybe she saw frustration. Maybe she saw laziness or confusion. Maybe she dismissed it as growing pains. Or maybe she sensed something deeper, but hoped love and patience would be enough. Her brother said she believed in him, even when they disagreed about his life path. She stayed by his side, she let him live at home, and she kept trying, unaware that danger could be sitting at her own dinner table. His online profile, once overlooked, now reads like a window into a troubled mind. The words ramble, drifting between humor and sadness, revealing someone lonely, uncertain, and struggling to find meaning. He mentions cannabis, video games, self-medication, and a social awkwardness that isolated him even further. He writes as if speaking into a void, expecting no one to listen. And the closing lines cut the deepest. He tells the reader they can stop reading, as if his life story is already unworthy of attention, as if he sees himself not as a person, but as a forgettable page in someone else's world. The expert reading his words felt it immediately. Emptiness, loneliness, insecurity. A young man lost inside himself, trying to speak, but not knowing how. To most people, it might have seemed odd, rambling, maybe even quirky. But to trained eyes, it sounded like a quiet cry from someone who felt invisible, someone who did not know who he was, someone who felt small in a world that expected him to be more. And in that silence, without recognition, without treatment, darkness grew. Until one night, everything broke. And a loving mother who tried to guide and support her son became the victim of a tragedy no one saw coming. Privilege, stability, opportunity. None of it protected that home from what hid beneath the surface. Because mental pain doesn't always scream. Sometimes it whispers until it explodes.
Even in the final discussion, one theme rises above all else. Many tragedies begin quietly. A young man in his 20s, no criminal record, no history of violence, just subtle loneliness, confusion, a lost sense of identity, a profile online that reads like a whisper instead of a scream. Most would scroll past it, not realizing the pain hidden between the lines. His words weren't loud cries for help, they were quiet, almost invisible signals that something inside him was breaking. And in the end, those signals went unnoticed until the worst possible moment. Experts say signs like these can appear long before violence. In childhood frustrations, emotional numbness, sudden anger, withdrawal, or a deep belief that one's life has no value. If no one sees these signs, if no one steps in, darkness can grow in silence. This case now stands as a grim reminder, a reminder that mental struggles do not always look dramatic. Sometimes they are hidden behind ordinary faces in ordinary homes. Sometimes they belong to the quiet kid, the socially awkward teen, the one who seems lost but never says it out loud. For Laura Williams, it is too late. A loving mother lost her life while trying to support her son. A family shattered, a community shaken. And a boy she raised now sits in a cell, his future gone, consumed by a single night of horror. But her story may still save others. If families listen, if communities pay attention, if we stop assuming silence means safety, if we learn to hear the cries that never sound like cries at all. Because tragedies like this rarely start with violence. They start with an invisible weight someone carries alone. A weight that, if left unrecognized, can one day destroy everything. The story ends here, but the lesson remains. Watch the quiet ones. Check on the lost ones. Do not dismiss the small signs, because for one mother in Connecticut, those signs came too late. And for her son, one moment in the dark changed 2 lives forever.